Zara still remembered the moment the email arrived on her cracked old laptop. Her hands were shaking as she read the words again and again. Full medical scholarship, London, United Kingdom. For a second, the tiny room in Lagos felt too small for her dreams. After years of studying under candlelight, skipping meals, and working part-time at a pharmacy to support her family, her biggest dream was finally coming true. But the excitement inside the house disappeared quickly. Her mother, Ifeoma, forced a smile and hugged her too tightly. Her father, Chuka, stayed quiet the whole evening. Later that night, Zara overheard them arguing in the kitchen. "If she leaves, who will keep paying the bills?" her father whispered angrily. "She will forget us when she becomes successful," her mother replied. The night before the flight, Zara packed her small suitcase carefully and reached for her passport. It was gone. Within seconds, panic filled the house. Her father pretended to search everywhere, opening drawers dramatically while her mother sat crying on the couch. "Maybe God doesn't want you to leave," Ifeoma said softly. Zara felt her heart break. Deep inside, she knew they had taken it. Still, the next morning, she went to the airport with tears burning in her eyes, hoping somehow things would change. At customs, an older immigration officer looked at her documents, then suddenly froze when he heard her name. "Zara. Zara Okafor?" he asked slowly. She nodded nervously. The man's eyes filled with emotion. Years earlier, Zara had saved his little daughter after a terrible roadside accident and stayed with her until help arrived. "You saved my child," he whispered. Within minutes, the officer contacted emergency immigration services and the British Embassy. Using old records and digital copies, they verified Zara's identity. Just as everything was approved, her parents rushed into the airport believing they had stopped her forever. But they arrived only in time to watch Zara walk toward the boarding gate. For the first time in her life, she didn't look back. Amira never told anyone she applied for the journalism fellowship in Canada. Not even her parents. She already knew what they would say. In their house in Nairobi, dreams were only important if they belonged to men. Her two older brothers had already wasted thousands of dollars chasing business ideas that never worked, but her parents still treated them like kings. Meanwhile, Amira worked long nights writing articles, helping pay rent, and buying groceries for the family. So when the acceptance email came, she locked herself in the bathroom and cried silently with happiness. For the first time in years, she felt like her life could finally become her own. But everything changed 3 days before her flight. Her mother, Saad, somehow found the travel documents hidden under Amira's mattress. That night, the entire house became cold and tense. Her father, Tund, slammed his hand against the table. "You want to leave this family behind," he shouted. "Who will help your brothers?" Amira tried to explain that this opportunity could change all their lives someday, but nobody listened. Her mother kept repeating the same sentence over and over. "A good daughter stays with her family." The next morning, her passport disappeared. Amira searched everywhere. Drawers, kitchen cabinets, under the bed. Nothing. Meanwhile, her mother acted calm the entire time. Secretly, Saad had hidden the passport deep inside an old church Bible nobody touched. On the day of the flight, Amira still went to the airport anyway. Her eyes were swollen from crying all night. Deep inside, she knew her family had destroyed her dream. At immigration, the officer asked for her passport. When she explained what happened, her voice broke completely. People nearby started staring as tears rolled down her face. Then suddenly, the customs officer looked at her carefully. "Wait, are you Amira Bello, the journalist girl?" She froze. Months earlier, one of Amira's articles exposing corruption in local housing programs had gone viral online. The officer had read it and never forgotten her name. "You're brave," he told her quietly. The officer personally contacted emergency immigration officials and the Canadian embassy. Hours passed while Amira sat shaking in the airport chair, afraid to hope again. Finally, the officer returned smiling. "You're boarding today." Amira burst into tears again, but this time from relief. As the plane lifted into the sky, her phone started ringing non-stop. Her mother. Again and again. Amira stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, slowly, she switched off her phone forever and looked out the window as Nairobi disappeared beneath the clouds. Naledi spent most of her life sacrificing for her family in Johannesburg. While other girls her age went out with friends, she stayed home learning coding from old second-hand laptops and free internet cafes. She worked small jobs during the day and studied late into the night. Every paycheck she earned went into helping her parents, and especially her older brother Saifo, who never kept a job for more than 2 months. Still, Naledi never complained. She believed one day all her hard work would finally change her life. And it did. After years of struggling, Naledi received an incredible tech job offer in Dubai with a salary bigger than she had ever imagined. She cried with happiness when she saw the email. Finally, she could build a better future. But her family reacted differently. Her parents became cold and angry. Her mother barely spoke to her, while her father kept praising Saifo non-stop. "A son carries the family name," he said one night at dinner. "A woman belongs with family." Naledi felt her heart sink. 2 days before her flight, she discovered the truth. Her parents had secretly sold her plane ticket and used the money to help Saifo apply for travel documents instead. Worse, her passport had disappeared. When she confronted them, her father shouted at her to stop being selfish. "You should be happy helping your brother succeed." Naledi locked herself in her room and cried the entire night. But on the morning of the flight, she still went to the airport carrying only a small bag and the little hope she had left. At immigration, her hands were shaking as she explained everything. The customs officer listened quietly while checking the system. Then suddenly, he looked at her carefully. "Wait. Naledi Makona." She nodded nervously. The officer suddenly smiled in surprise. "You won the National Youth Coding Competition years ago, didn't you?" Naledi stared at him, shocked. Back then, her story had appeared on television after she created an app that helped students find free learning resources. The officer quickly became serious again as he checked deeper into the records. A few minutes later, his face changed completely. "Your passport wasn't lost," he said quietly. "Someone tried to officially cancel it this morning." Naledi froze. The officer immediately called airport security. Within minutes, police officers arrived and discovered her father had submitted false claims to block her travel. Just then, her parents and Saifo walked into the airport thinking they had won. Instead, they watched police begin questioning them in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Naledi received emergency clearance to travel. As she walked toward the boarding gate, tears filled her eyes. For the first time in her life, she stopped carrying everyone else's future and finally chose her own. Efua had dreamed of becoming a doctor since she was a little girl running through the crowded streets of Accra with schoolbooks pressed against her chest. While other children slept, she stayed awake studying by a weak lamp, promising herself that one day she would save lives. Years later, she graduated top of her medical class. The entire university celebrated her achievement. Professors praised her brilliance, and soon she received an incredible offer to continue training at a famous hospital in America. It felt like every sacrifice she had made was finally worth it. But inside her own home, the happiness quickly disappeared. Her mother, Abina, became strangely quiet after hearing the news. Instead of celebrating, she started making bitter comments every day. "So now you think you're better than everyone. You'll leave and never come back. You want people to worship you because you're educated." Efua tried to ignore the hurtful words, but deep down they crushed her heart. She wanted her mother to be proud of her more than anything. The night before her flight, Efua finished packing and reached for her passport. Her hands froze. The passport was torn into pieces. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Then she heard her mother's voice from the doorway. "Maybe this will teach you not to become too successful." Efua broke down crying right there on the floor. She felt like her future had died in front of her eyes. Still, early the next morning she went to the airport anyway. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying all night. She carried only her documents and a tiny piece of hope. At immigration, the officer asked for her passport. With shaking hands, Efua explained everything. Her voice cracked as tears rolled down her cheeks. The officer looked at her carefully for a long moment. Then suddenly his eyes widened. "Dr. Efua?" he asked softly. She looked confused. A smile slowly appeared on his face. "3 years ago, you treated me during a free medical outreach in my village. I had no money, but you still helped me." Efua remembered him instantly. The officer stood up immediately. "The country needs people like you to succeed," he said firmly. He personally contacted emergency immigration services and helped verify her records through the embassy. Hours later, Efua was finally cleared to travel. Just as she prepared to board, her mother rushed into the airport, breathing heavily, thinking she could still stop her. But she was too late. Efua walked toward the boarding gate without saying a single word. Tears filled her eyes as she stepped onto the plane, realizing that sometimes the people who should love you most are the same people who fear your success the most. Imani grew up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Kampala, Uganda, where power cuts were normal and some nights there wasn't enough food for everyone. But even as a little girl, she believed education could change her life. While other children played outside, Imani sat beside broken radios and old computer parts, teaching herself science and technology from borrowed library books. People laughed at her dreams. "A girl from here can never become successful," neighbors used to say. But Imani never stopped believing. After years of hard work, she earned a huge scholarship to study engineering in Germany. Felt unreal. For the first time, she could finally escape poverty and build a better future. The only problem was her father, Jabari. He controlled everything inside the house. He hated the idea of his daughter living overseas and making her own choices. So Imani kept the scholarship secret for months while preparing quietly for her journey. But 2 nights before her flight, Jabari found the hidden documents. The entire house exploded with shouting. "You think you can abandon your family?" he screamed. Before Imani could stop him, her father grabbed her passport, acceptance papers, and travel documents, threw them into a metal bucket outside, and burned them. Imani stood there crying as the flames destroyed everything she had worked for. Or at least that's what her father thought. Unknown to him, Imani had secretly scanned every important document and saved copies online at an internet cafe weeks earlier. The next morning, she rushed to the airport carrying only her phone and a small backpack. But at the check-in counter, officials refused to let her board without the original passport. Imani felt her entire world collapsing. Tears rolled down her face as people walked past her. Then suddenly, a customs supervisor passing nearby stopped and stared at her carefully. "Wait, aren't you Imani?" She looked up in confusion. A few months earlier, Imani had appeared on local television after winning a national competition encouraging girls in STEM education. Her interview had inspired thousands of young girls across Uganda. The supervisor recognized her instantly. "You're the girl who said technology can lift families out of poverty," he said with a smile. Within minutes, he personally contacted immigration authorities and the German embassy. Using the scanned copies and scholarship records, they confirmed her identity and arranged emergency travel authorization. Hours later, Imani finally received clearance to fly. Outside the airport windows, she saw her father standing near the entrance, furious after realizing she had found another way. But this time he couldn't stop her. As the plane lifted into the sky, Imani looked down at Kampala disappearing below the clouds and whispered softly to herself, "My future starts now." Zuri had been carrying her family on her shoulders since she was 19 years old. In Dar es Salaam, she worked long nursing shifts during the day and extra hours at a private clinic at night just to keep food on the table. She paid her younger brother's school fees, covered rent, bought groceries, and even helped neighbors when they were struggling. Everyone depended on her. But nobody ever asked what Zuri wanted for herself. After years of exhaustion and sacrifice, she finally received life-changing news. A hospital overseas offered her a nursing contract with a salary big enough to completely change her future. For the first time in years, Zuri smiled without forcing it. But the happiness inside her home quickly turned into tension. Her mother, Halima, became cold and distant. Her father stopped speaking to her properly. One night, Zuri overheard them whispering in the kitchen. "If she leaves, how will this family survive?" her mother said nervously. "She belongs here with us," her father replied. The night before her flight, everything changed. Zuri woke up and realized her bedroom door was locked from the outside. First she thought it was a mistake, then she searched for her passport. It was gone. Her heart started racing as she banged on the door, shouting for help. But nobody answered. Hours passed while panic slowly crushed her chest. Finally Zuri understood the truth. Her own family had trapped her inside the house to stop her from leaving. Tears rolled down her face. But then she noticed the small bathroom window. It was narrow and dangerous, but it was her only chance. With shaking hands, Zuri squeezed herself through the window, scraping her arms against the concrete wall before jumping outside. She grabbed a small bag she had hidden earlier and rushed toward the airport. By the time she arrived, she was exhausted, sweating, and barely holding herself together. At customs, she explained everything through tears, but without a passport, the officers couldn't let her through. Then suddenly, a female customs officer looked at Zuri carefully and froze. "You donated blood at Muhimbulai Hospital 2 years ago, didn't you?" she asked softly. Zuri blinked in surprise. The officer's eyes filled with emotion. "My son would have died without that blood donation." Zuri remembered the emergency case immediately. The officer quickly contacted immigration authorities and helped verify Zuri's records legally through emergency procedures. Hours later, Zuri finally received permission to travel. Just as she walked toward the boarding gate, her mother arrived at the airport crying uncontrollably after realizing Zuri was truly leaving. But it was too late. For once in her life, Zuri chose herself instead of everyone else. As the plane lifted into the night sky, she closed her eyes and finally felt free. Talia's voice had always been special. Even as a little girl in Kigali, people would stop outside the church just to listen to her sing. Music was the only thing that made her feel truly alive. When life became difficult, when money was short, or when her parents argued, Talia escaped into songs. Over the years, she started posting short singing videos online using an old borrowed phone. Slowly, people began noticing her talent. One video suddenly went viral across social media, and everything changed. A famous music academy in Paris offered her a full scholarship. Talia couldn't believe it. She cried while reading the email because it felt like her dreams were finally opening in front of her. But inside her home, the news brought fear instead of happiness. Her parents were deeply religious and believed overseas success would destroy their daughter. Her mother, Mireille, kept warning her every day. "Foreign countries change people. You will forget your culture. You are inviting evil into this house." Soon the situation became worse. Her parents started telling relatives and neighbors that Talia was possessed because of her obsession with music. Some people in the neighborhood even stopped speaking to her. Others whispered when she walked by. Talia felt completely alone. Then, 3 days before her flight, her passport disappeared. She searched the entire house desperately, already knowing the truth deep inside. Her mother avoided eye contact the whole day while pretending to pray. The night before her trip, Talia cried herself to sleep feeling like her future had been stolen from her. Still, the next morning, she went to the airport carrying only her documents folder and broken hope. At immigration, she tried explaining the situation, but without a passport there was little anyone could do. Talia sat alone near the customs area, wiping tears from her face while watching other passengers board their flights. Then suddenly, a customs officer walking past stopped and stared at her. "Wait, aren't you the girl from that singing video?" Talia looked up in shock. The officer smiled immediately. "My daughter plays your song every single day," he said. For the first time that day, Talia smiled a little through her tears. After hearing her story, the officer personally contacted immigration officials and the French embassy. Using digital records and emergency verification, they managed to confirm her identity and approved temporary travel authorization. Hours later, Talia was finally allowed to board her flight. Meanwhile, her mother arrived at the airport too late to stop her. As Talia walked onto the plane, she felt scared, emotional, and free all at once. A few weeks later, her story spread across Rwanda. News stations called her the girl who refused to let fear destroy her dream. And for the first time in her life, Talia realized her voice was powerful enough to change not only her future, but other people's too. Kayamika had spent her entire life feeling invisible inside her own family in Abuja. No matter how hard she worked or how much she sacrificed, everything always revolved around her younger sister, Ronk. If there was only enough money for one child, it went to Ronk. If there was praise in the house, it went to Ronk too. Meanwhile, Kayamika became used to hearing things like, "You're the strong one," or "Your sister needs more support." So she stayed quiet and kept fighting for her future alone. After years of studying and working small jobs, Kayamika finally earned a chance to move abroad through a business training program in Europe. It was the first opportunity that truly belonged to her. For once, she allowed herself to feel excited. But the excitement inside the house quickly turned strange. Her parents suddenly started asking too many questions about her travel documents. Ronk kept acting nervous whenever Kayamika mentioned the flight. Then, 2 days before departure, her passport disappeared. Kayamika searched everywhere in panic. She emptied drawers, bags, cupboards. Nothing. Her mother pretended to help while her father blamed her for being careless. But late that night, Kayamika overheard the terrible truth. Her parents had secretly given her passport to travel agents handling Ronk's own visa process because they believed the younger daughter deserved the opportunity more. It felt like her heart shattered inside her chest. Still, on the day of the flight, Kayamika went to the airport hoping somehow things could still be fixed. At the check-in counter, officials denied her boarding immediately after seeing the missing passport issue in the system. Humiliated and exhausted, Kayamika sat near immigration crying quietly while passengers walked around her. Then suddenly, a customs officer passing nearby looked at her closely and stopped. "Wait, I know you," he said slowly. Kayamika looked up through tears. Years earlier, she had found a lost wallet full of cash near a crowded market and returned it honestly instead of keeping the money. The wallet had belonged to the officer standing in front of her. "You refused a reward and said honesty matters more," he remembered. After hearing her story, the officer immediately became suspicious. He launched an investigation into the missing passport and contacted airport authorities. Within hours, officials uncovered the fraud involving the travel agents and her family. Suddenly, Kayamika's parents and Ronk were being questioned publicly at the airport while shocked travelers watched nearby. For the first time in her life, the truth could no longer stay hidden. Meanwhile, emergency arrangements were made to restore Kayamika's travel clearance legally. As she walked toward the boarding gate, tears rolled down her face. Not because she was hurt anymore, but because after years of being treated like second place, she had finally chosen herself first. Ayanda grew up in Cape Town with a small second-hand camera and a dream nobody around her understood. While other kids played outside, she spent hours filming streets, people, sunsets, and tiny moments nobody else noticed. She loved telling stories through film because it made her feel like her voice mattered. But her father, Themba, hated it. "Movies won't feed you," he used to say. "Filmmaking is for rich people, not girls like us." Still, Ayanda never gave up. She studied filmmaking online using free internet at cafes and entered every small competition she could find. Slowly, people started noticing her talent. Then one afternoon everything changed. Ayanda received an email offering her a once-in-a-lifetime internship in Hollywood. A famous production company had seen her short film from a youth festival and wanted her to train in America. Ayanda screamed so loudly her neighbors came outside to check on her. For the first time in years, she truly believed her life was about to change. But when her father heard the news, his face became cold. "You're not leaving this country to chase stupid dreams," he said firmly. The arguments inside the house became worse every day. Themba kept saying Ayanda was embarrassing the family by refusing to choose a real career. Then, the night before her flight, Ayanda opened her bag and froze. Her passport, visa papers, and travel documents were gone. She searched the entire house desperately while her father sat silently watching television like nothing had happened. Deep inside, she already knew the truth. The next morning, Ayanda still went to the airport carrying only copies of her acceptance email and tears she could barely hold back. At immigration, officials explained there was little they could do without the original documents. That was the moment Ayanda finally broke down completely. She sat near the terminal crying quietly, feeling like her dream had died. Then suddenly, a senior immigration officer passing nearby stopped and stared at her. "Wait, are you the girl who made that short film about the township boy and his grandmother?" Ayanda looked up in shock. Months earlier, her emotional short film had played at a local youth festival, and clips from it had spread online. "My daughter made me watch it 3 times, the officer said with a smile. After hearing her story, he immediately contacted immigration services and the American embassy. Using festival records, digital files, and emergency verification, they confirmed her identity and arranged temporary travel authorization. Hours later, Ayanda was finally allowed to board the plane. As she walked through the gate, she looked back one last time and saw her father standing far away near the entrance, staring silently. Years later, Ayanda returned to Cape Town as an award-winning filmmaker. Cameras flashed around her at the airport while reporters shouted her name. And standing quietly in the crowd was her father, finally realizing the dream he tried to destroy had made his daughter unforgettable. Sophia spent most of her life taking care of everyone except herself. In Mombasa, Kenya, she worked long hours repairing electronics and tutoring students just to help her family survive. Every month, almost all her money went straight into the house. Her parents depended on her so much that sometimes it felt like her dreams didn't matter at all. But secretly, Sophia had been studying engineering for years, hoping one day her life could become bigger than the small street she grew up on. Then one morning she received the email that changed everything. She had been accepted into an engineering program abroad with financial support. Sophia cried with happiness while reading the message over and over again. But when her parents found out, the atmosphere inside the house became heavy and cold. Her mother, Zainab, kept asking strange questions about her documents and flight details. A few days before departure, Sophia's passport suddenly disappeared. Her parents pretended to panic and claimed thieves must have entered the house during the night. But Sophia knew the truth. They were terrified of losing the daughter who paid their bills. The morning of her flight, Sophia still went to the airport carrying copies of her documents and the little hope she had left. At customs, officials told her there was almost nothing they could do without the original passport. Sophia felt completely defeated. Tears filled her eyes as she stood there watching other passengers move forward while her own future slipped away. Then suddenly, one customs officer stared at her carefully. "Wait, you're the girl from the flood rescue, aren't you?" Sophia looked shocked. Months earlier during severe flooding in Mombasa, Sophia had risked her life helping rescue trapped children from rising water. Videos of her bravery had spread online and across local news. The officer recognized her immediately. After hearing her story, he personally escorted Sophia through emergency immigration procedures and contacted the embassy to verify her identity legally. Hours later, Sophia finally received clearance to board the plane. As she stepped onto the aircraft, tears rolled softly down her face. She looked out the window one last time and whispered quietly to herself, "For once, I chose myself."